All right, so let's get into the Falcons. Last year, again, we kind of hinted at this already. They won 7 games. They went 7-10, 6-10-1 against the spread. A bettor who bet $100 unit better who bet on the Falcons money line and spread every single week, lost $715. So wasn't a happy camper. And their Pythag, which is being cited on pretty much every podcast that I listen to, as we see on the next slide, I think it was around high 4s, so 4.9. And again, that's what everyone I keep hearing cite is, oh my gosh, this is like one of the worst 7-win teams ever. Their Pythag is in the high 4s. They got, won a bunch of games that they necessarily shouldn't have won. And so we can kind of see on the slide here too, just the volatility of the Falcons from a power rankings perspective. So we see they started off the season around 20th, you got crushed in that opening game versus Philly. I was surprised by that. I was higher on Philly than most coming into last year, but I was not expecting the Falcons to play that poorly, and it was obviously a forecast of things to come. Came back, got demolished by the Bucks as well. So you got like 0-2, 2 non-covers, kind of come back, beat the Giants, and lose to Washington. Don't cover again, lost by 4. Kind of middle of the road there. Then they jump after beating the Jets. I don't know why everyone got so excited after beating the Jets per se. But then a couple losses again, then kind of basically hung around that 24 to 25th kind of ranking over the course of the season. And the thing is that's not 32nd. So there's never a point in time where people thought that the Falcons were the worst team in the league last year. And I don't necessarily know that they got materially worse in the offseason. I don't love Matt Ryan. That's one of the bigger reasons why. So I don't think it's necessarily even down.
Yeah, you're
looking at me with
I'm not a huge Matt Ryan fan, but it's certainly a downgrade, at least if we're projecting quarterbacks from Ryan to Mariota. I think, obviously, Joe feels
Matt Ryan behind a really bad offensive line.
I mean, that's not changing though.
Right, but I guess we're looking at, since we looked at some of that stuff, that Mariota isn't necessarily good behind a potentially bad offensive line. But I just feel like his mobility is still going to bring something to the table, which we know Matt Ryan certainly can. I mean, again, he's a little savvy in the pocket, can kind of move around, but
one could do a lot worse than being not worse under pressure. Matt Ryan he's very smart. He makes great pre-snap reads and he adjusts blocking schemes very well. But Matt Ryan wilts under pressure more than most quarterbacks do. Whereas Mariota is he doesn't really change, whether the offensive line is good, bad, or otherwise, whether he's being pressured or otherwise, it's more or less the same guy. Average is an upgrade here.
I think so. Anything kind of stick out here to you, Judah, or Joe, kind of any of these games that you remember kind of betting on, either making money on or kind of getting taken to the woodshed? Did you guys bet on the Falcons at all really last year?
I bet against them against the Patriots. I think we actually watched that game together. That was the Patriots.
That was an easy one, yeah.
And the Falcons, but they really had no offensive weapons at that point. I think Pitts may have been down, and it was like Cordell Patterson, and that's about it. Josh Rosen got in there, threw a bunch of picks. But I think like the market almost built in their 2022 power rank at the end of this year, where they kind of like by week 12, week 13, I'm like, okay, the Falcons are this bad team, and we're not really going to sway from there.
I think the other thing too is like why they hung around in the 20s here for about 5-6 weeks over the course of the season, in the high 20s, even in the teens, was I think some optimism baked around Arthur Smith. I know I was optimistic. I left the door open for him to potentially bring some offensive firepower, really take advantage of Matt Ryan and really, kind of open up this offense. And obviously that didn't happen at all. Now there are some people after just 1 year already thinking that Arthur Smith's one of the worst coaches in the NFL. Anyone have any kind of like views on Arthur Smith that one of the things that we'll kind of talk about is his odds to be the first coach fired at 1,400 right now, which is about a top 3, top 4 ranking. So even after 1 year, even the market is starting to position around where he might be in some trouble. The thing is, I mean, the expectations are so low for the Falcons. Like, how bad does he possibly have to be to get fired? I mean, even if they're 0-10, like, I can't see them necessarily firing him, especially given the such low expectations.
Yeah, I don't think Arthur Smith's going anywhere. He's going to be 2 years in. They gave him an old Matt Ryan with no roster talent. They gave him Marcus Mariota on a bridge deal and a rookie Desmond Ridder. Short of some Urban Meyer caliber disasters, I think he's going to be around next year. And I don't think the Falcons fans should be super stoked about it. As I mentioned a little earlier, he is kind of the second coming of Mike Mularkey in that he wants to run the ball. He runs a very non-conventional offense, a run-based offense. And similar to something that we see in Tennessee, no coincidence there, the Falcons are going to be a type of team that wins by very few when they win and loses by a lot when they lose, because they are not set up to pass, so they can't really come from behind that effectively, just schematically. They don't have that many effective passing plays. It doesn't even matter who the personnel is, and that's a whole other story. When they do win, they're trying to get a lead and grind clock, run a halfback dive, burn 2.5 minutes off the clock, punt. And if you get a first down, oh my goodness, another 2.5 minutes to run off the clock. So Tennessee and Atlanta are two teams that I've been high on in the past, and my co-host on my podcast, Alex, has a rule. I'm not allowed to bet them, and I'm certainly not allowed to bet them laying anything more than 1.5, because they will blow it, even if they win.
Also, I mean, when we look at this, I don't know if anything comes to mind for either of you guys too, I mean, why is the Pythag so low? Or like, why do you think the expectations are so low for them? Like in the sense of even looking back and reevaluate him kind of post hoc? Because I mean, I'm looking at the mean margin, which is a time weighted kind of how much was this team winning or losing by, and then weighted by the time that they had that lead or that deficit. And so I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. The mean margin was positive. So that's 8. If anything, just that in itself would be saying that they underperformed those 8.
But do you notice a common theme about the opponents in those games?
They all suck.
They all suck. We're talking about the Giants, the football team, Jets,
Simeon, Saints.
The Panthers twice after they've fallen apart. Meaning, I think that's kind of there. They can't beat a good team is kind of the market's view.
Gotcha.
And I think that's what's balancing out. I think that we have an advantage on the Pythag because of, as I explained, their playing style, right? If they're going to lose, they're going to get kind of stomped on. And if they're going to win, they're going to keep it close because they're just trying to get out of the game. So that lends itself to negative trending margins. But as Judah points out, some of their wins may not have been the most sustainable sort. Just the fact that they got to play the Lions in because of their ranking in 2020.
And that was with lucky. Boyle at quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, they've kind of got a who's who of crappy quarterbacks you don't want starting in their opponent's list.
Okay, that's fair. But still, to say that they underperformed by 2 full games still seems a little aggressive. All right, so moving into the offseason, this is the other thing is what we didn't talk about is, I mean, the cornerback duo, they signed Casey Hayward, and I understand he's been hurt and, you know, cornerbacks age fast.
He is old.
But they got AJ Terrell, now Casey Hayward.
Casey Hayward's good.
Starting quarterbacks.
Casey Hayward's still good.
Okay, so this is...
He's really good.
I was reading an article from a Madden ratings perspective. This is a top 4 cornerback unit. I mean, obviously they drafted Drake London now with Pitts. I think that's if London can even perform just average expectation for a rookie wide receiver. And you continue to use the gadgetness of Patterson. And I'm actually really curious to see how they leverage Patterson with someone like Marcus Mariota, in fact. I mean, that's a totally different duo than using Matt Ryan, because Matt Ryan's not even going to flirt with moving out of the pocket. And then the losses, obviously, Matt Ryan, Russell Gage, a couple others, besides Matt Ryan, I don't think necessarily lost. The net kind of talent plus or minus, I think, is break even or maybe even a little bit better. I mean, they still have Grady Jarrett too, Pro Bowler. There's stars on this team, I feel like, and it's by no means remember last year or maybe 2 years ago, the Houston Texans, who were giving up on the season before it even started.
Yeah.
All right. And basically had a rent a head coach, rent a players who are you're definitely not coming back next season. Everyone was 35. They were expected to win 4 games.
Yeah. Some of these additions, though, I think this is where Madden differs from, kind of a conceptual understanding of football, which is secondary is a weak link system. You've got 7 players covering on a play. If 2 of them are good, but the other 5 suck, it doesn't really matter. You're going to attack the other 5.
Yes.
Hayward's going to be good, Terrell's going to be good, and that's not really going to make a difference because they're going to be throwing at the other 5 guys. Offensively, I think it's a great point that linebackers are going to have to actually respect Mariota's ability to run. That didn't happen with Ryan. But, Joe, I'm curious what you have to say here.
So, actually, the weak link point is what I was going to get at with the secondary, because Isaiah Oliver's a really good nickel, too. So their corners are 3 deep with, legit dudes, assuming Casey Hayward is what he was last year, which is scary. If Casey Hayward is the Casey Hayward we've seen to this point, there is some argument for this to be the second best cornerback duo in the NFL. But regardless of how that pans out, you've got Richie Grant and Eric Harris starting in your safety backfield. That's Eric Harris, as a young man, was not fast enough to play free safety. He's one of those savvy, works really hard, first in, last out, coach's son type of guys. And he's not good. He couldn't start over Jonathan Abram with the Raiders, and Jonathan Abram's abysmal. And then Richie Grant is just completely unproven. So bet on tight end overs against the Falcons.
And I definitely get your point too as well, Judah. And I think Joe even proves it even more so that, even if you have great corners on a standalone basis, it's not going to be necessarily sufficient to move the needle if you're just weak at all other kind of spots. It's just going to break down. All right, so 2022, again, 4.5. Super low, plus 400 to have the fewest wins, plus 500 to have the fewest points scored. Then again, we mentioned earlier, plus 1,400 for Arthur Smith to be the first coach fired. Strength of schedule, 10th hardest. Again, that's implied by the expected wins of their opponents. Rest, net negative 7 days. Their mean spread is almost a full touchdown at 5.6, so almost 6 points. So let's walk through the schedule pretty briefly. So I'll open up versus the Saints, and then go to the Rams. That's obviously a tough back-to-back opener, but then it gets a little easier with the Seahawks and a lot of question marks around the Browns. Kind of that first 4 games. Again, if they're going to be really, really bad, then certainly can go 0-4. But I could see if you got 2 wins potentially in that first 4 games, you're halfway home.
Yeah, and I think that personally, the win probability of 42% over the Seahawks, I think is ludicrous. And seeing that, I'm making a mental note that I'm going to be unloading the bankroll on the Falcons in that game. I think the Seahawks might be the worst team in the NFL, and if they're not, they're bottom 3. I think we can all agree Marcus Mariota is probably an upgrade from Drew Lock or Geno Smith.
Yeah.
Personally, going through accounting for a little bit of variance in luck, see about 7 wins here in some form or fashion. But again, that's assuming that Marcus Mariota stays healthy. If Desmond Ridder has to come in as a rookie with I don't want to say bad, because I actually like some of their pieces, but a shoddy at best offensive line, I can see this thing snowballing so fast. And that is really what scares me off them, because if I could guarantee health, I would be hammering the over for Atlanta, and I just can't.
Seems like you should bet some Mariota under props and some right tail Falcons.
Yeah, that's actually a good hedge. I totally agree. If Ridder comes in, then this kind of every single thing that I've been talking about kind of blows up right along with it. The thing is, what I would take some comfort from is, again, what I think I mentioned earlier was I was actually surprised that Matt Ryan started every single game last year. So as bad as this offensive line is, and as immobile as he was able to stay healthy and not get blown up to the extent that he was going to be putting himself in a really bad position. Although, again, we know obviously more mobile quarterbacks could, someone like Mariota could be to his detriment.
Yeah, the tool that is actually a curse. You have Marcus Mariota, you want to run him on a read option, and that's how he blows his shoulder out in week 2, and that's how your entire season goes right down the tubes before you even get a beatable opponent.
Yes, I think probably all these spreads, you can add 3 points to them if Ridder's the quarterback. But we see also an underdog in every single game, and they're probably going to be an underdog in this game as well. There's just no line for this really right now because the quarterback situation is unknown, although it's kind of known. I don't know why they just don't come out. Our Pythag 2.0 model on this has no bet. I was looking at it. There's only like 6 bets that it wants to make over the overall team, so not necessarily going to see a lot there.